Foreigners living in Japan often face things that tourists can't even imagine. When you look from the outside, Japan seems like a utopia: order, cleanliness, trains arriving exactly on time, everyone around polite, smiling, bowing. But the longer you live here, the more cracks you begin to notice in that perfect picture. Behind politeness and discipline lie deep contradictions, cultural traps, and everyday difficulties that can affect your life much more than you'd expect. The first thing that shocks and annoys many foreigners is the work culture. Tourists and newcomers admire the diligence of the Japanese, their discipline. But once you're inside the system, that admiration quickly fades. Imagine a meeting with 30 people. You present your idea, and even if it's objectively disastrous, no one will say no. Everyone nods, writes notes, agrees. And later, if the idea collapses and the project fails, no one will take responsibility, because nobody opposed you. To know your colleagues' real opinions, you have to hold a series of one-on-one meetings before the group meeting. This is called nemawashi, preparing the ground. Without it, no decision works. But if you slip up and say, "I spoke to Bob and he thinks," trust is gone. The person will shut down because you exposed someone else's opinion. They don't argue openly because they are terrified of conflict. There are even rumors that some companies hire a loud American. Someone whose official job is to argue in meetings, because the Japanese themselves won't. Their role is to voice disagreement, to be the bad cop. If that's true, it's both funny and depressing. In a culture where harmony matters most, even the truth has to come through a designated troublemaker. And that's only the beginning. In Japan, basic civil rights are weakly protected. For example, if you face discrimination due to disability at work or in healthcare, your chances of getting justice are small. Judges are extremely reluctant to issue clear verdicts. Their goal is to push both sides toward settlement. Even when one side is obviously guilty, they'll hint, "Let's resolve this amicably." And if a case does go to trial, the verdict is almost always guilty. The Japanese legal system produces very few acquittals. At the same time, prosecutors avoid cases where they can't guarantee conviction. Which means if you're a victim, but the prosecutor thinks the case isn't ironclad, they'll just close it. The offender walks free, the victim is left unprotected. This creates a double standard. From outside, it looks like the law works perfectly, but in practice it doesn't protect the vulnerable. And for a foreigner, that's a cultural shock. In Western countries, court is the last resort of justice. In Japan, court is a tool to keep conflict out of sight. Another minus is the absence of true closeness. You may interact with Japanese people for years and never know what they really think of you. Asking personal questions is not customary, showing curiosity is seen as disrespectful. This is considered respecting boundaries. But in reality, it creates distance that's almost impossible to cross. People rarely invite others to their homes. Meetings are planned in advance and feel more like official events than warm gatherings. I remember during my first year I felt a terrible loneliness. Colleagues were polite, we went out for drinks, laughed together. But it never went further. No one invited me over, no one shared anything personal. When I tried to take the initiative myself, inviting someone home, I saw confusion in their eyes. For them, it was unusual, even inappropriate. And I realized, in Japanese culture, closeness is something that only grows from childhood or decades of living together. Everything else is surface level. Even the language reflects this. Japanese has different levels of speech, from the highly respectful kigo used with bosses, to casual forms reserved for close friends or family. You literally cannot speak the same way to a childhood friend and to a colleague. Even if you want to be honest, the language itself builds barriers. It's like a built-in filter constantly reminding you, keep your distance here, be polite there, don't show your real self. Over time, you learn to adapt. You realize that at bars after work, namakai, you're allowed a little more freedom. Colleagues might open up a bit more, joke, complain. But it's still temporary. The next day, the mask is back. Then comes another contrast. In Japan, everything falls into 3 categories: brilliantly made, archaic, or weirdly creepy. The last one is its own world. For example, photo shoots with underage girls in provocative outfits. In the West this would be absolutely forbidden. In Japan it's not. Documentaries exist where photographers admit that if their own daughter were in such photos, they'd probably kill themselves. This duality is shocking. A society that looks perfectly proper on the outside tolerates such dark practices inside. The financial side of life is another letdown. Salaries are low. Even with the cost of living, making ends meet can be tough. Foreigners arrive thinking, it's a developed country, salaries must be high. Then they find themselves struggling. Even giants like Nintendo know this. The Switch 2 costs around $345 in Japan, while it's $449 in the US. They understand Japanese consumers can't justify a $500 console. It seems like a small detail, but it says a lot. And then there's racism. I had a Vietnamese friend who grew up in Southern California. He spoke Japanese as his third language. But in Japan he was treated as low class. He was refused entry into restaurants, denied service in shops, called boat trash. He tried to change his image, wore expensive suits, spoke only English, emphasizing his American identity. It helped sometimes, but not always. Once, even dressed up, a woman asked him, "Who taught you English, you idiot?" Imagine the absurdity, a man fluent in 3 languages still being humiliated. Even among Japanese people themselves there's internal racism. Lighter-skinned look down on darker-skinned. A friend told me it's fairly common. And this in a country that prides itself on harmony. That's why Japan both amazes and disappoints. On one hand, you live in a place of order and safety. On the other, you realize it's all built on masks, on endless politeness that never becomes sincerity. In Japan, even the simplest everyday tasks can turn into long and exhausting sagas. A tourist will never notice this. For them, everything looks beautiful, efficient, and sparkling clean. But for those who live here, the system is overloaded with rules and formalities that often make you want to pull your hair out. Bureaucracy is one of the biggest hidden burdens. Almost nothing can be solved quickly. There are no convenient online services that have become normal elsewhere. Here it's still paper, stamps, and postal mail. And if you make even the smallest mistake, your application is sent back. This isn't an exception, it's the rule. Japanese offices do not correct on the spot. No, everything must be flawless. If it isn't flawless, you start again from scratch. I once tried to renew my driver's license. In Europe or America, it would have taken a couple of hours. In Japan it dragged on for weeks. Wrong photo background, wrong stamp, missing translation, all reasons to reject my papers. And every time I had to start over. Eventually I realized, this isn't incompetence, it's how the system is designed. The same happens with renting apartments. A French friend of mine had her documents returned 3 times because she had written "no" instead of "not applicable." The meaning was identical, but the form demanded exact wording. For her it felt ridiculous. For the clerk it was normal procedure. Another example, tax returns. In many countries they're submitted online. In Japan, they're still filled out by hand, on paper, stamped with a personal seal, hanko, and submitted in person. People queue up patiently for hours. Why? Because for Japanese society, paper is considered safer, more reliable than digital records. Then there's the matter of quitting jobs. For Westerners this is usually straightforward, you resign, and that's it. In Japan it can turn into an emotional drama. An American coworker of mine took a summer-side job. When she decided to quit, she was pressured to apologize for abandoning the team. The managers told her she was letting everyone down. And later, when she applied for another job, her former company quietly hinted to the new employer that she was unreliable. This is something people rarely talk about. In Japan, social recommendations matter immensely. If your previous employer labels you as not a team player, you may be shut out of future opportunities. It doesn't matter how good your performance was. What matters is that you didn't follow the unwritten rules of harmony. For foreigners this is especially brutal. In the US or Europe you can walk away from a job freely. In Japan, you leave with guilt, as if you've committed a betrayal. And then there are the things that just seem bizarre. Take women's underwear theft, for example. It sounds like a bad joke, but it's a real issue. Most apartments don't have dryers, so people hang laundry outside. Landlords openly warn female tenants, don't hang underwear on the first floor, it might get stolen. At first I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But it was said with complete seriousness. The contrast is staggering. In a country where wallets are left on cafe tables untouched, men steal panties from balconies. That's Japan in a nutshell, absolute honesty in one aspect, disturbing deviance in another. The same duality exists in trust and control. Yes, you can leave your bicycle unlocked for hours. But at the same time, trash bags must be transparent, with your name written on them. If you forget to write your name, the garbage collector might return the bag to you. This actually happened to me. I put out a bag without a name. That evening, a garbage worker knocked on my door and handed it back. I asked, "How did you know it was mine?" He calmly replied, "There were items with English writing inside." The work culture is another minefield. Results don't matter, effort does. If you finish your work in 3 hours, that's not praised, it's frowned upon. Because everyone else stays for 10. Leaving early breaks the harmony. So offices are full of people pretending to work, waiting for the boss to leave. It's called service overtime, sabisu zangyo, unpaid hours spent at your desk just to show loyalty. I saw colleagues flipping papers or typing nonsense, simply because leaving was unacceptable. One Japanese coworker told me his wife gave him only enough cash each day for lunch. Why? To stop him from spending money in strip clubs. So he ate the cheapest noodles, saved the difference, and used it for nightlife anyway. Outwardly, theirs was a picture-perfect marriage. In reality, it was a cat-and-mouse game. This strange balance of appearances and hidden realities is everywhere in Japan. Racism and xenophobia show up too. Many white foreigners assume they'll be respected. Then they experience cold rejection. Some are denied service in restaurants, others refused housing. It's not open hostility, it's soft, persistent exclusion. A quiet message, you don't belong here. I had a Vietnamese friend who faced it even worse. In the U.S. He thought racism was bad. But in Japan, he felt real humiliation. He was called boat trash, refused service in shops, barred from restaurants. He tried to change his image, wearing suits, speaking only English, emphasizing his American identity. Sometimes it worked. But one day, dressed neatly, an old woman still sneered, "Who taught you English, you idiot?" Imagine, a man fluent in 3 languages, still ridiculed. Even within Japanese society there's hidden prejudice. Lighter-skinned Japanese sometimes look down on darker-skinned. A friend told me it's quite common, though not openly discussed. And then there's garbage. Sorting it is like passing an exam. Paper on Tuesdays, plastic on Thursdays, glass on Fridays. Make a mistake and your bag is returned. In small towns, everyone notices. Neighbors watch. And if you break the rules often enough, they may quietly ostracize you. Winter adds another ordeal. Roads aren't salted. Everything turns into ice. Old people fall and break bones daily. I fell dozens of times myself. Once in Sapporo, I told a taxi driver the roads were dangerously slippery. He laughed, "No, it's safe." At that very moment, his car skidded out of control at a red light. We both laughed, but inside I thought, this is insane. A country so advanced, yet ignoring something so basic. So Japan is a puzzle of contrasts. A country where you can trust strangers with your wallet, but not with your garbage. Where order coexists with absurdity. For tourists, it's paradise. For residents, it's an endless battle with invisible rules. Life in Japan slowly teaches you to perceive the world differently. You begin to understand that everything here is built on hierarchy and rules that penetrate every layer, from language to daily habits. A tourist only sees the surface, politeness, cleanliness, order. But the longer you live here, the more you start to notice what lies beneath, and that hidden layer is often far more exhausting than the facade. One of the most striking examples is the role of women. On paper, Japan is modern, women get education, work in offices, even lead teams. But traditional expectations remain deeply rooted. I once attended a business meeting led by a female department head. She ran the meeting with authority, assigning tasks to male colleagues. It looked progressive. But when it came time to serve tea, she herself stood up and brought drinks for everyone. Not an intern, not a junior employee, the boss herself. The men didn't even blink. For them, it was natural, if there's a woman in the room, she serves. It's a perfect illustration of how modernity and tradition coexist. On the surface, gender equality. Underneath, roles that haven't changed for centuries. For foreigners, this is often shocking. Especially for those who grew up in cultures where such behavior would be considered humiliating. Racism in Japan takes a unique form. It's rarely aggressive, more often childlike curiosity. "Oh, you can use chopsticks? You speak Japanese?" At first it feels cute. But over months and years, you realize it's not admiration, but a reminder, you are not one of them. You'll always be gaijin, an outsider. Even if you live here for decades, marry a Japanese partner, raise children, speak flawless Japanese, you remain not from here. I've heard countless stories. One American said, "I've lived here 20 years, and I still feel like I'm on the other side of the glass." Another told me how his coworker constantly marveled, "You eat sushi so naturally with chopsticks." Every time, it was the same phrase. And each time, it wasn't praise, it was a way of saying, "You're different." This sense of distance shows up in banks, rental agencies, even hospitals. Japanese clients are trusted without question. Foreigners are asked for multiple documents, extra verification. The system doesn't treat you as an equal resident. It treats you as temporary, suspicious, someone who must constantly prove legitimacy. Language itself reinforces this distance. Japanese is structured around levels of politeness: kigo for bosses, neutral for colleagues, casual for close friends. You can't speak to a childhood friend and to a coworker the same way. Each social